Krishna Maharaj, my humble obeisances. Nice to see you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, nice to see you.
Nice to see you again.
Thank you for coming to our platform.
My
Please,
pleasure.
we can.
I'm happy.
Yeah. It's always a pleasure to have Your Holiness around. Thank you. We can start, please, when you are ready.
Okay. I thought we should wait a couple more minutes. Since
Okay.
I suppose everyone is going by the time.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, you have an interesting background.
That's Krishna on your shoulder.
Chasing Krishna with a stick. That's funny.
I can change it to something else.
Oh no, it's quite all right. It just looks like Mother Yashoda is quite angry. And seems like we have some devotees from Europe joining us.
Yeah, that's good for everybody worldwide.
And, I should put this here. Okay. Okay. Yes. So, Kusha Prabhu, did you want to say something in the beginning, or we just start?
We just start, Maharaj. We already know you very well.
Okay.
We just start, please.
Okay.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Let's start with some prayers.
Okay.
Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavangscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatang Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitangscha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Deving Saraswating Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye. Nashta Prayeshvabhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. So here we are back in Africa, West Africa, speaking from northeastern Europe, where everything is white outside, covered with snow. And today we are continuing with Bhagavatam, first canto, chapter 7, verse 27. And today is also a special day, the appearance day of Sri Advaita Acharya. So we should certainly say something in glorification of our very prominent Acharya, and also Supreme Lord and direct associate of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. We can begin with the Bhagavatam. This is the chapter called The Son of Drona Punished. This is dealing with Ashvatthama, and it's a quite dramatic moment in this account, which is a summary of what is described in more detail in the Mahabharata. And I do want to read some from a translation of Mahabharata to give us more of the picture of what is going on. So we'll begin with our verse. This is verse number 27, chapter 7, canto 1. śrī-bhagavān uvāca, vetthedaṁ droṇa-putrasya, brahmam astraṁ pradarśitam, naivāsau veda saṁhāraṁ, prāṇa-bādha upasthite. Vetthedaṁ droṇa-putrasya, brahmam astraṁ pradarśitam, naivāsau veda saṁhāraṁ, prāṇa-bādha upasthite. Vetthedaṁ droṇa-putrasya, brahmam astraṁ pradarśitam, naivāsau veda saṁhāraṁ, prāṇa-bādha upasthite. So śrī-bhagavān uvāca, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, said, Veta, just know from me, idam, this, droṇa-putrasya, of the son of Drona, brahmam astram, hymns of the Brahma, nuclear weapon. Pradarśitam, exhibited, not, eva, even, asau, he, veda, know it, saṁhāraṁ, retraction, prāṇa-bādhe, extinction of life, upasthite, being imminent. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "Know from me that this is the act of the son of Drona. He has thrown the hymns of nuclear energy, brahmāstra, and he does not know how to retract the glare. He has helplessly done this, being afraid of imminent death." This is Lord Krishna speaking to Arjuna, who has just addressed the Lord because he is confronted now with this terrible weapon that has been launched by Ashvatthama. Let's read the purport. The brahmāstra is similar to the modern nuclear weapon manipulated by atomic energy. The atomic energy works wholly on total combustibility. And so the brahmāstra also acts. It creates an intolerable heat similar to atomic radiation. But the difference is that the atomic bomb is a gross type of nuclear weapon, whereas the brahmāstra is a subtle type of weapon produced by chanting hymns. It is a different science. And in the days gone by, such science was cultivated in the land of Bharatavarsha. The subtle science of chanting hymns is also material, and that phrase is in italics. But it has yet to be known by the modern material scientists. Subtle material science is not spiritual, but it has a direct relationship with the spiritual method, which is still subtler. A chanter of hymns knew how to apply the weapon as well as how to retract it. That was perfect knowledge. But the son of Drona-acharya, who made use of this subtle science, did not know how to retract. He applied it, being afraid of his imminent death, and thus the practice was not only improper, but also irreligious. As the son of a brahmana, he should not have made so many mistakes, and for such gross negligence of duty, he was to be punished by the Lord himself. Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langayate girim yat kripa tamaham vande Shri Gurung Dinataranam. The son of Drona. Drona, of course, is the great and very powerful Brahmana teacher of the use of weapons. He was teaching the Pandavas, and he was also teaching the Kauravas. They were all together as teenagers, no doubt already as young teenagers beginning their training. And Ashvatthama, being one of, or being the son of Drona, would have also been present. He would have known, he would have been associating with the Kauravas and the Pandavas, yes, since childhood. So he would have known them all. At one point, it's mentioned that Drona, being very pleased with Arjuna, this is mentioned in the Mahabharata, being very pleased with Arjuna, bestowed upon him a special weapon called the brahmāshiras. Now, this brahmāshira or shiras is it the same as the brahmāstra? This is not entirely clear. There seems to be some overlap of reference, but it's possible that there are two different weapons. Presumably, both were very powerful. In any case, when Ashvatthama saw his father giving this weapon to Arjuna, he became very upset. And he was not hiding his disturbance. He expressed his unhappiness to his father, Drona, in such a way that Drona felt impelled, he felt somehow forced, perhaps, to also give the weapon to his son. It seems that in giving the weapon to his son, he did not give him the full instruction about use of the weapon. That's not explained so clearly, but from what is mentioned here, it seems that he was ignorant. In a sense, he knew only half the use of the weapon, because proper use would be to know how not only to launch the weapon, but how to retract the weapon. This would have been part of a kshatriya's duty, presumably, because the weapon needed to be controlled in all respects, especially such a weapon. In any case, he has launched the weapon, and now the trouble begins. The trouble continues, actually, because we know there's been big trouble just before this, and that is why Arjuna has come after Ashvatthama. According to the Mahabharata, initially Bhima goes after Ashvatthama, and then Krishna and Arjuna together go after Bhima. Why are they going after him? Because what has Ashvatthama just done? The night before, he has gone on a total rampage. The rampage of Ashvatthama has to do with Ashvatthama's anger, of course. He was enraged by the fact that that Duryodhana was lying about to die, and that he had been mortally wounded by Bhima in such a way that was not according to Kshatriya regulations. He had pummeled him. He had pounded on his thigh, in other words, below the waist, and this was strictly forbidden. He was enraged by this, and combined with that, Ashvatthama was enraged at how his own father had been killed. And it was a kind of, one may say, a kind of righteous anger. And so he meets Duryodhana, and seeing him in his mortally wounded condition, his rage boils, and he speaks with Duryodhana, and he begs Duryodhana to grant him, Ashvatthama, to become the general. Now, the war was obviously over. Everybody understood the war is over, but not for Ashvatthama. Ashvatthama felt that the war is not over, that now he is going to wreak revenge. And in this way, he's going to justify, or he's going to essentially bring Duryodhana's triumph even in his death. And Duryodhana, again, feeling pressured, like Drona before him, feeling pressured, Duryodhana says, all right, you become the general. And he gave him at this time, if I remember how it was described, he gave him at this time this crown jewel, which was his kind of insignia for being now the general. And then Ashvatthama rushes off, and it's nighttime, so it's not a time for battle, but he is in such an intensity of rage. He meets his friends, Kritavarman and Kripa, and he tells them, now we have to do something. We have to destroy the army of the Pandavas and destroy the Pandavas. And they reach to the camp where the army of the Pandavas are staying, but the Pandavas are not staying there. And the reason they're not staying is because Krishna has arranged for them not to stay there because he knows there's going to be trouble. And at this point, Ashvatthama doesn't yet know what to do, but then he sees a sign from nature which tells him what to do. In the night, he sees an owl swoop down into a tree and kill several crows that were sleeping in the tree. And Ashvatthama sees this as a sign. And so now he knows what he's going to do. But before he does this, he needs to do this, he needs to enter into the camp. But there is a guard at the gate of the camp, and the guard is none other than Lord Shiva. And Ashvatthama worships Lord Shiva in such a way as to please him and infuse him, Ashvatthama, with the power of Lord Shiva. In effect, we can say Ashvatthama becomes a kind of Shakti Avesha, avatar of Shiva. But it's explained earlier in the Mahabharata, in the Adi Parvan. We're speaking now from Soptika Parvan, which is the 10th of the Parvans. In the first, the Adi Parvan, it's mentioned that Ashvatthama is constituted of 3 parts of Shiva. These 3 parts are Yama, Kama, and Krodha. These 3 aspects of Shiva combine into Ashvatthama. In this state, he enters into the camp, and there he does his dastardly deed of murdering one after another, beginning with Drishtadyumna, who had killed his father. And then the Pandavas, the sons of the Pandavas, I don't believe they are named, chopping off their heads in their sleep. So it is a very horrible scene. And after this, the next morning, of course, the truth comes out, and the news is sent to Draupadi, and Bhima finds out. So I want to read now a passage from the Mahabharata. This is again from, this is, Mahabharata. It's in a portion of the, is it part of the, I think it's after the Sauptika Parvan. Yeah, the Sauptika Parvan, and then comes the Aishika Parvan. Okay, so if you'll allow me to read. This is a translation. It's a quite recent translation from Vivek Dev-Roy, who has translated the unabridged, what's called critical edition of the Mahabharata, which was prepared early part of the 20th century by a team of scholars. I met Vivek Dev-Roy this last year in Delhi, and he took a copy of my book on cows and gave a very nice endorsement of it. Okay, he says, Bhimasena, the great archer, was traveling fast. So now Bhima is going after Ashvatthama. O bull among the Bharata lineage, however, in a short while, those tigers among men caught up with him. Kaunteya, and here this refers to Bhima, blazed in anger, and he rushed toward the enemy. Though those Maharatas caught up with him, they could not restrain him. While those handsome and firm archers looked on, using his extremely fast and tawny steeds or horses, he headed toward the banks of the Bhagirati, the Ganga. He had heard that Drona's great-souled son, the slayer of his sons, would be there. So Ashvatthama is referred to as great-souled here. Mahatman, presumably. He saw the cheerful, illustrious, and great-souled Krishna Dvaipayana Vyasa there, seated with rishis. He also saw Drona's son seated near them with dust covering the tips of his hair. So in other words, Drona is trying to sort of hide amongst some sadhus who are listening to Vyasadeva as he's presumably reciting some shastra. The perpetrator of evil deeds was covered in clarified butter and was dressed in a garment made of kusha grass. Kaunteya grasped his bow and an arrow and rushed toward him. The mighty armed Bhimasena exclaimed, "Wait, wait." Drona's son saw the one with the terrible bow dashing toward him with a bow and an arrow. He saw his two brothers and Janardana, Krishna, stationed behind him. He, that is Ashvatthama, was distressed and thought that he had met his end. However, since his soul was never distressed, he thought of the divine and supreme weapon. Drona's son grasped a reed, that is like a straw, a piece of maybe kusha grass, in his left hand, and invoked that celestial weapon on it. In the presence of those brave ones, who also possessed divine weapons, the intolerant one released it, uttering the terrible words, quote, "to bring an end to the Pandavas," unquote. O tiger among kings, for the sake of confounding all the worlds, Drona's powerful son spoke these words and released that weapon. A fire was generated in that reed, and it seemed to consume the three worlds like Yama at the end of time. So it goes on. At this point, Krishna understands what's happening. And Krishna, addresses Arjuna. He says, "O Arjuna, O Pandava, O Arjuna, in your mind, you have the knowledge of the divine weapon that was instructed to you by Drona." So he's reminding Arjuna, you also have a weapon. You've received it from Drona. So now is the time to use it. He says, save yourself and save your brothers, because the weapon has been released by Ashvatthama to kill the 5 Pandavas. He says, you should release it since it is capable of countering all weapons. And then it describes how Arjuna prepared himself for this. He bowed to the gods and all his preceptors, meditating and pronouncing auspicious words. He released that weapon so as to pacify the other weapon. The Bhagavatam version I just read is that Arjuna circumambulates Krishna. Here it says he bowed to all the gods. That weapon was violently released by the wielder of Gandiva. And then it describes how this release of the weapon is similar to that of the weapon of Drona's son. It blazed in great flames surrounded by a disk of energy. There were many peals of thunder, and thousands of meteors fell down. A great fear was generated in all beings. Sought to pacify the 2 brave ones, Bharadvaja's descendant and Dhananjaya. In other words, Ashvatthama and Dhananjaya, or Arjuna. Those 2 sages were learned in all forms of dharma and had the welfare of all beings in mind. Those 2 supremely energetic ones stationed themselves between those two flaming weapons, those two illustrious and supreme rishis, were incapable of being assailed by anything and were like two blazing fires themselves. In other words, Narada and Vyasa, being who they are, could not be harmed by these two weapons, so they put themselves in between the two weapons to block them, because they understood this is going to be a mess. If we don't do something, this is going to have terrible consequences. They could not be touched by any living being, and they were revered by the gods and the Danavas. For the sake of the welfare of the worlds, they pacified the energies of the weapons. And then they say, these weapons should not be used against humans. Why? Why have they invoked them? Then it says, Dhananjaya, that is Arjuna, quickly withdrew his divine weapon. As we know, Arjuna knows how to do this. He knows how to withdraw his weapon. And when he sees Narada and Vyasa, he feels perhaps a kind of embarrassment that, whoa, I've gone overboard sending out this weapon, although Krishna had ordered him to send it. He withdraws it at this point. And he explains, though, this weapon was used by me to pacify the other weapon. Once I withdrew this supreme weapon, once I withdraw this weapon, all of us will be destroyed. It is certain that Drona's son, the perpetrator of wicked deeds, will consume us with the energy of his weapon. And then Arjuna requests Narada and Vyasa to do something so that the weapon will not destroy them, the Pandavas. Please think of some means so that we and all the worlds are saved, he says. Then it goes on about how difficult it is to withdraw such a weapon. Arjuna was able to do so because of his high spiritual qualification. It says, with the exception of someone with a cleansed soul and someone who was a brahmachari, no one else was capable of withdrawing it. Now you may say, wait, Arjuna was not a brahmachari. But then here it says, Arjuna had followed the vows of a brahmachari. He had obtained a weapon that was difficult to get. However, he had never invoked it, not even in a time of great calamity. Pandava followed the vows of truth. He was brave and a brahmachari. He was obedient to his superiors. It was because of this that Arjuna was capable of withdrawing that weapon again. Well, Ashwatthama is not capable of withdrawing his weapon, nor, it seems, does he want to withdraw it. However, and here's where there's what seems to be a bit of departure between the version of Mahabharata and the Bhagavata version. In the Mahabharata, it's said that because Arjuna had requested Narada and Vyasa to do something so that he and the Pandavas and the rest of the world would not be destroyed. So they requested Ashvatthama to divert his weapon. The weapon couldn't be withdrawn, but it could be diverted. But it would need to meet some mark because he had infused the weapon with his mantra, which said, "Let the Pandavas be destroyed." And so instead of destroying the five Pandava brothers, it should instead go to the wombs of the descendants of the Pandavas. In this case, Uttara, and it's not mentioning who are the others, but apparently more than one. And it goes to meet the womb of Uttara, so to destroy the Garbha, the grandson of Arjuna, who is of course Parikshit. Again, here is a difference. In the Bhagavatam, we understand Krishna enters into the womb to protect Parikshit, and at this time Parikshit sees Krishna, and so he is saved. The Mahabharata version, as we have it, says that in the womb Parikshit was killed and he was stillborn, and then he was brought to life by Lord Krishna. In any case, we may say the end result is the same. Krishna saves Maharaj Parikshit, and of course this is all part of the grand introduction, which is this first canto to the rest of the Bhagavatam, preparing us to appreciate who is Maharaj Parikshit and why it's so significant that Maharaj Parikshit will meet with Shukadev Goswami and we'll hear from him the Bhagavatam. So that's taking, if you like, the two perspectives on this account of what Ashvatthama is doing and his acts of destruction and what will come following this. Also, there are a difference between the Bhagavatam and the Mahabharata about the punishment of Ashvatthama. So this is something about this moment in this very dramatic episode, again, which is described in the Bhagavatam because it is a critical moment in what will be the life of Maharaj Parikshit. So it's a crucial moment, and we can say that also the portrayal of Ashvatthama as one who is simultaneously powerful and not able to control his power may be contrasted with Maharaj Parikshit, who is very powerful and perfectly able to control his power. Or we can make a contrast with Arjuna more immediately, but we may say more broadly in the context of first canto, because the Pandavas were all implicated one way or another in the battle of Kurukshetra. Their ways of fighting were not all strictly according to the rules of battle of the Kshatriya. And so, and Maharaj Yudhishthira at the end of the battle feels himself deeply guilty for the death of so many. And so all of this, we can say tarnishing, perhaps. One might view the identity, the position of the five Pandavas as in some sense tarnished. But in contrast, we have Maharaj Parikshit, who is free from all of these, any of this history. He is coming into the world. Who is he seeing at the very beginning of his life? He sees Krishna. And this is the beginning also of, we can say, the life of the Bhagavatam, because his life then will lead up to and be culminated in the hearing of the Bhagavatam. In contrast to Ashwatthama and his very dark character. Well, speaking of his dark character and remembering that it has some identification with Lord Shiva, maybe one way of segging into discussion of Advaitacharya, since today is Advaitacharya's Avirbhav Titi. We are certainly celebrating Advaitacharya's life. And my reflection on Advaitacharya, Advaitam Harinadvaitat Acharyam Bhakti Shanksanat Bhaktavataram Isham Tam Advaitacharyam Ashraye, offering a prayer to Advaitacharya, is to remember how Advaitacharya meets Chaitanya Mahaprabhu just after Mahaprabhu has taken sannyas. And I am reminded that it is Advaitacharya who invites Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to appear. That is described in Adi Lila. Now we are looking at the beginning of Madhya Lila. This is chapter 3 of Madhya Lila. And, oh, very nice. Yes, picture of Advaitacharya in the morning offering worship to the Lord in the form of Shalagram Shila, calling out loudly, Hunkara. It said, with a loud voice calling for Lord Mahaprabhu to appear. And his call is successful. And he is inviting the Lord to appear. And then again, he invites the Lord to be received by him at his home in Shantipur. As we all know, as soon as Mahaprabhu took sannyas, he departed from Katwa to go. He wanted to go to Vrindavan. His purpose in taking sannyas, he saw himself as initially taking shelter of Lord Krishna in Vrindavan. And so with Nityananda Prabhu and others, he heads for Vrindavan, but alas, after 3 days of traveling in Radhadesh, in that area of Bengal where the Ganga does not flow, as it is called, he finds himself, they find themselves on the bank of the Ganga, not so far from Navadvip, toward the south, but on the western bank, because here the Ganga runs north and south, on the western bank. And who do they see coming toward them in a boat? Advaitacharya. And initially, Mahaprabhu is thinking, oh, Advaita Acharya, you have come all this way to the Yamuna, near to Vrindavan. This is wonderful. But after some time, it becomes clear what has happened is that Mahaprabhu has been tricked by Nityananda Prabhu. This is a transcendental trickery which has enabled all of the devotees to see Mahaprabhu again, to see them what they are concerned may be, excuse me, the very last time that they see him, and in particular for his mother, for Shachi Mata, to see him for what may very well be the last time, because when one takes sannyas, that means permanent departure from the family. So now what is happening is that Advaita Acharya is hosting Chaitanya Mahaprabhu at his home. And what a wonderful host he is. We may recall that Advaita Acharya is among the Vaishnavas of Bengal. He is possibly most senior in age. It's thought that he must have been more than 50 years older than Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He was very senior. He was very respected by all of the Vaishnavas, and he was known as an acharya. He was the teacher of the Vaishnava community. And now he is welcoming Mahaprabhu as well as Nityananda Prabhu in his home, and he is welcoming him with a meal, with a grand meal. And so this occasion of hosting Lord Chaitanya with his devotee, with a wonderful feast, is described in quite some detail by Krishnadas Kaviraj, who was not personally present at this occasion, and yet is eager to tell us in such detail as if he was personally present. I like to think that as Krishnadas Kaviraj wrote the details about what particular food preparations were offered, that that Krishnadas was happily remembering his youth in Bengal, perhaps longingly remembering, because now, since so many years, decades, he has been living in Vrindavan, which of course is very wonderful, but some of the preparations, perhaps many of the preparations, the foods, would not have been available for residents of Vrindavan, those that would have been available in Bengal, because such vegetables would not be available. So he says, for example, Sardrak Vastuka Shaka Bibidha Prakar Patola Kushmanda Bari Manakachu Ar. Among the cooked vegetables were patolas, squash, manakachu, and a salad made with pieces of ginger and various types of spinach. Cha imaricha sukta diya shabapala mule amrita nindaka pancha bidhatik jale. There was sukta, bitter melon, mixed with all kinds of vegetables, defying the taste of nectar. There were 5 types of bitter and pungent suktas. The next verse gives more detail. Among the various vegetables were newly grown leaves of neem trees fried with eggplant. The fruit known as patola was fried with pulabari, a kind of dal preparation first mashed and then dried in the sun. There was also a preparation known as kushmanda manachaki. And there's a short purport. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada writes, "We request our editors of cookbooks to add all these nice preparations described by the experienced author, Srila Kaviraj Goswami." So Prabhupada made a specific request, which, well, the only cookbook I know of that may be a direct response to this was done by now Maharaj, Pritivardhan Maharaj, the principal of the Mayapur Gurukul. He did a lot of research and they put together a cookbook, which I don't think is very much known around ISKCON, but I believe is available from the Mayapur Gurukul, in which they give recipes for many Bengali preparations. The only difficulty being, if you're not in Bengal, you may find it a problem to get all these vegetables to cook these preparations. Well, it goes on with this description, and then we have how Chaitanya, Advaitacharya has Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhu sit down to eat. Mahaprabhu says, "I'm a sannyasi, you can't expect me to eat all of this." Nityananda Prabhu on the other side says, "When are you going to give me something to eat? I've been starving for the last 3 days, and now you're just giving me this little bit of rice." And then starts this transcendental fight between Advaita and Nityananda. In general, though, the point I want to make for a short reflection on Advaitacharya is, and I think it's mentioned here, he is the perfect grihasta host. He is acting as a perfect grihasta, welcoming the Lord and his associates. And of course, he has welcomed the Lord by first calling the Lord to take birth. And now is finally coming the time when he can sort of fully welcome him as a grihasta in his home by feasting him in this way. And of course, he's going to also welcome the mother of Mahaprabhu, allowing her to meet her son this possibly last time. So it's a very bittersweet meeting. And it's a bittersweet meeting for all the devotees, knowing that Mahaprabhu is now going to depart. The agreement is made, however, that he will not go to Vrindavan, because that very well could have meant they would never see him again. Instead, he will go to Puri, agreeing to the request of his mother. In Puri, if we fast forward to the end of Chaitanya Charitamrita and in the end of nearing the end of Mahaprabhu's life, Mahaprabhu receives a message from Advaitacharya, and the message is that there's no more need for you to stay. He gives this interesting, in an indirect way, message that there is no more demand for rice in the marketplace. In effect, Advaitacharya is saying, you have fulfilled your mission now, for which I called you. I called you to do what you have done, which is to bless the world by your presence, by the process you have given of chanting the holy name, and by your teaching to chant the holy name, and by your demonstration of what is the highest mood of devotion in the person of yourself. You have fulfilled all of this, and now you can depart. So generally we don't hear of a grihasta, a host, welcoming a person and then indicating, okay, now you can leave. But we may still say that it's not inappropriate for a host, if one is being hosted, to receive welcome and a nice meal and association at one's house. Then there may be some way that the host indicates that it will not be taken as an offense if from now you wish to leave. In other words, the host will always be concerned for the comfort of the guest, physical comfort and also mental, emotional comfort. So Advaitacharya, as Mahaprabhu was with him in Shantipur, he did insist on him to stay longer. He wanted to leave, but he said, no, you must stay at least 2 or 3 more days. And so in this way, the kirtan continued. And of course, it gave opportunity for Mother Sachi to cook for her son, for Nimai. Advaitacharya is, of course, an eternal associate of the Lord. He's identified, at least in some mysterious sense, with Lord Shiva as well as with Lord Vishnu. But we especially like to remember him in his very sweet exchanges with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, as described in the biographies of Mahaprabhu. Shri Advaitacharya ki jai, Krantaraja Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai. So let me stop at this point. If there's some comment or question, perhaps we can continue for a bit.
Thank you, Maharaj, for your wonderful class. It was so nice to have the holiness. My question is on the brahmāstra, number 1 of Aswatthama. When he learns the brahmāstra, he wants to destroy. So my question is, as a movement, ISKCON, we know that there are so many people who are disturbing Prabhupada mission. Is there any particular brahmāstra to deal with such people, to have peace?
Hare Krishna. First, there has to be qualification to launch weapons, and they must also be, one must have also the ability to withdraw them, according to what we're reading here, which Ashwatthama does not have. Srila Prabhupada spoke of weapons sometimes. His weapons were 2 in particular that I'm aware of. One, of course, was or is his books. And the other is prasadam. So this has not changed to my knowledge. These continue to be powerful weapons, and we continue to wield them. And someone may ask, well, then in this case, what would you mean by withdrawal of these weapons? Withdrawal means here with the books that we withdraw ourselves to also read the books, not that we simply distribute the books, but we also read them. And we withdraw into our practices, our sadhana, and we withdraw into reflection for ourselves about how to practice and how to practice Krishna bhakti, how to approach the Lord, how to purify our hearts, to allow the Lord to be in our heart, and with purified heart, then to be empowered to influence others in positive ways. We, of course, also like to, you speak of protecting Prabhupada's movement. Prabhupada prescribed for us to pray to Nrsingadev. The Lord in his Nrsinga form is very fierce. And I like to remember the prayer that Prahlad prays in 5th canto of the Bhagavatam, which is, first of all, invoking the Lord to destroy the tendency within ourselves, within our heart, for fruitive activity. Namastejas tejase avir avir bhava. May you appear avir bhava. Vajranaka vajradangscha. Karma shayan. Randhaya. May you remove the asha, the desire, the longing for karma, for fruitive action. Randhaya tamo grasa om swaha. Grasa, destroy in some way, I don't remember exactly. So we can remember Nrsingadev, pray to Nrsingadev. We can think how to attract people to hear Krishna Bhakti message, whether through books or through other media. Nowadays, nobody likes to read books. Who reads books, right? So finding different ways that people can hear the message. How about street theater, for example? Street theater. In the time of pandemic, of course, we may find ourselves limited in ways we're familiar with. So we have the internet, but at some point, possibly street theater becomes available. And prasadam. Everybody understands prasadam.
Thank you, Maharaj, for a wonderful answer. Anybody has questions, kindly unmute yourself and ask Maharaj question.
We have one question on the chat from Dira Lalita. Why did the Pandavas suffer so much, even though they were of great character, honest with Krishna as their friend? Indeed, why did they suffer? This was also Bhishma's question. And he was asking the question right in front of Krishna. And Krishna remained silent. So what I understand from this is despite all these qualifications, Krishna allowed them to suffer as ways by which they would be further glorified. If they wouldn't suffer in the ways they did, for one thing, we wouldn't have the Mahabharata. And if we didn't have the Mahabharata, would we have the Bhagavatam? I don't know. Okay, that's a short answer, but we have others here. George Omega. Don't know if I'm pronouncing right.
Okay, Hare Krishna Maharaj. Yes, please, Omega. That is the name. Okay, Maharaj, Hare Krishna. Thank you very much for your wonderful lecture. My network is not good, so I will not be able to open up my video. So please.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Okay, please. My question goes like this. I learned there was a time in America when devotees went on Harinam. People have been harassing them. So this thing kept on for so long. So the devotees have to resort to it by looking for some macho men to go and beat up the hell out of those people. So as a movement, do you have to sit down and say whatever happened is by Krishna's arrangement? Or is there any particular point in time that as a movement, we should stand up? Because here in Ghana also, sometimes people slap devotees just by the way of preaching. Sometimes doing Harinam, people do slap us, but we take it as a blessing. So I would like to know at what point in time can we also, let's say, let me put it this way, that we can fight for our rights.
To retaliate? Okay, that's it's an interesting topic, and I don't know if we can make a general statement about this. I would put it this way. It wouldn't be improper to have one devotee, one person who stands by devotees and maybe even wears a uniform, as a private, what's the word? A private protector, as a bodyguard. I don't think it would be improper to have someone there who is trained and who obviously looks like someone that you would not want to fight with. In other words, somebody big and powerful. I know, for example, I'm here in Poland, and His Holiness Indradhyumna Swami, since, what is it now, 25 years, 30 years, I don't know, since decades, he's been doing these wonderful programs, mainly along the northern coast of Poland during the summer. And he has, I don't know how many, but he has a small group of devotees who are trained in, I think, some martial arts, and they are dressed during programs. He has them dress in, guards' outfits. So it's clear to everyone that these guys are guards, and they are trained, and they are looking, they are watching, and if anyone causes trouble, they're going to respond. So I think to have such person, I mean, it depends on so many factors, situations, but it could be appropriate. to have someone where that person is not provoking anyone to make trouble. That, of course, wouldn't be wanted. But it's there and, ready. And people see, okay, they have somebody with them who could make it difficult if we make it difficult for the devotees. In particular, of course, if there are women in the kirtan group, they should be protected. And it should be understood by the public that they will be protected. And I think a lot of, I think this practice is being done by various kirtan parties around the world. Does that make sense?
I'm okay.
You're okay with that?
Okay. Thank you very much. Yes, please. I'm
All
okay.
right.
Yeah. Okay. Hare Krishna.
Sahadev Prabhu, you have your hand up.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much. Your classes are always so wonderful, so intriguing.
Thank you.
You oftentimes start your class as if you wanting to know. And then as you build up, you give so many different angles to what we think we already know. Because I didn't actually think that Kanteya could also be referred to Bhima. I always thought Kanteya always only referred to Arjuna, but of course they are all sons of Kunti.
Right.
So that makes sense to
Three
me.
of them. Three of them
Yeah.
at least. Well, yeah, three of them.
I mean, the three of them, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. My question is, Srila Prabhupada was saying in the purport that the subtle science of chanting hymns is also material, but it has yet to be known by the modern material scientists. And I remember some time ago in a class, in school, my sociology instructor was denying the science of astrology to be a real science because it cannot be proven.
Mm-hmm.
Because science, according to what scientists of today imply, mean that they give you the theory and then you put the theory into application and then you get results and then you call it a science. But they cannot do that with something like metaphysics. So how do we try to prove to these material scientists that these subtle hymns, these brahmāstra weapons, are also science, are scientific? How do we do that? Thank you.
If I knew how, I would tell you. First of all, this word prove is it's a problem. It's a very difficult idea, proving. In the scientific world or any other world, it's hardly used. Actually, it's used in mathematics. You can prove a mathematical theorem. Yeah, a theorem. And there are proofs within various forms of logic, and there are various forms of logic, including fuzzy logic, modal logic, and what all I don't know anything about. But the idea of proving, I think, is it's well, good luck. That's all I can say. First of all, it's a question of the sphere within which you are making a proof. And it's also a question of who it is who is open to being persuaded of something. I think more helpful than the idea of proof in general is the idea of plausibility, that something is plausible.
Okay.
And here I think we have a lot more space within which we can communicate, whether it's with scientists or students of science or whatever. And I think this area is where we need to develop our abilities to show plausibility. Of course, this is one of the things the Bhaktivedanta Institute has been working on for many years. There's a new, since recently, group within Bhaktivedanta Institute, now based in Gainesville, Florida, the Bhaktivedanta Institute for Higher Studies. And they just acquired beautiful property, a large house, and they have a lot of plans to do publishing and have conferences and so on. So you might want to keep in touch with them. They have a newsletter, an online newsletter, and you can see what they're doing. And you can pose your questions to them. Now, to speak about astrology not being a science, one of the ways that science is typically defined is in terms, and this is not the only way, but my little understanding of philosophy of science is whether a proposition is falsifiable or not. What does that mean? Falsifiability is the ability, in theory at least, to show that a certain hypothesis is not true. So what would a critique of astrology would be that it is not falsifiable. If you are an astrologer and you say, well, according to the way the planets are moving, we can understand that such and such will happen in the future. And then you wait for that event to happen and it doesn't happen, then the astrologer will say, well, it didn't happen because something else happened, or whatever. Or why isn't it that the astrologers are not able to predict, for example, a terrible earthquake that kills so many people? So various attempts have been made to do what could be called a controlled experiment, astrological experiment. But this is not something I've delved into, so I don't know to what extent any of such efforts have been fruitful. There's a department or a program, maybe not a whole department, but a program of study at the University of Bath in the UK that studies astrology. But they're not studying it as their assumption is not that astrology is for real. It works. We just need to learn better how to read astrology. More, they're studying the cultural side, as I understand, the cultural side of astrology, how it is that different cultures have used astrology in their collective lives. But that's about all I can say. There's also been some scholarly, textual work on astrological texts. So I know one devotee in Sweden who has edited, that is to say, he's analyzed very carefully some Indian astrological text from some hundreds of years or more than 1,000. I don't know how old it is. So people do that kind of scholarship. And there may be a fuzzy area in between, between sort of hard science, or we can say skeptical science, and people who study, like parapsychology, who are looking to see where we may find some truth in astrological understanding. But that's all that I know. Okay, well, time is passing, and
thank you, Maharaj, for your wonderful class.
Thank
we
you
expect
all.
To have the holiness again next month. Your mercy. Thank you so much.
I
Thank
have
you.
a question. Is it time?
Yeah, Maharaj, say it's time.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll be in touch. Śrīla
Hare
Prabhupada
Krishna.
ki jai.
Jai. We ask for the
Grantaraj
devotees to kindly
Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai. Anantakoti
unmute
Vaishnavinda
yourselves.
ki jai.
Let's chant Hare Krishna to Maharaj for coming.
Hare
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna,
Hare
Krishna,
Hare Rama,
Krishna,
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 Hare
Hare
Rama,
Hare,
Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Go